I've been podcasting for, I guess it's been like 2020. And the thing I like about like these live streams, like the one I did last week, it was kind of the same thing. It was just like a lot of times, like I'll go into a podcast and it's just this, it feels very staged. It's like, all right, now I got to do the introduction. And then like, here's my questions. And this is just more, let's just hit live and just have a conversation.
Absolutely.
And it feels so much better. So it's good to see. It's good to see you. I like your setup. You look really crisp and I like the plant, like the energy. It's nice.
Thanks, man. We out here just trying to give life to the world. In this dark world that we are in is what we call November. Don't know what's like down where you're living, but in Canada, this time of the year sucks. So we're just trying to make it lively. You know what I'm saying?
Is it really, does it get really cold or something? Or is it, I mean, not cold, but I'm sure it gets really cold, but like, is there more darkness or dark days than there is light days? Because I know it's like that in Alaska where the next couple months it's just nothing but darkness.
Oh yeah, we don't have as bad as them, which is nice. But no, like November is just typically that month where we just don't see the sun. It's just like always cloudy. It's always overcast, always gray, and the days are short on top of that. And so it's just like you just got to pop that vitamin D and hope for the best at this point.
Yeah, I'm with you. Yeah, that's cool. Well, it's Thanksgiving week, so it's kind of a slower week over here, here in the States. So just kind of getting ready for that. And, this live stream, or at least today's topic about kind of talking a little bit about like the Jaguar rebrand and Bluesky and some of these like current events that have been kind of popping up. And the thing that I was kind of thinking about when I decided to put it out to X as far as a topic to really jam on was thinking about it. Like, well, how can we take some of these current events and like talk about it in a way that could be useful to like our own businesses, because it seems like there's a lot of like stone throwing at different things that people are doing, and it gets a little bit polarizing, and I get it. I get where people are coming from. I'm not here to judge, but it's like, how can we turn this into something that's actually useful and maybe take some lessons from it? So that's really my intent. And I had said this to you on the message before. I was like, just so you know, like, this is kind of where I'm coming from, on these topics that are clearly very polarizing online. So, yeah.
Well, unfortunately for you, I came with my stones. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's.
I mean, hey, listen, if you want to throw stones, no stopping you here. I'm not going to stop your whatever message you got to put out there.
It's something like what I found really interesting. We'll start it off like this, right? So, what I found really intriguing is I first came across the story through the designers on X. They were talking about it a lot, and I think I was more so surprised by the vitriol that was coming out, and like designers typically like that in general. It's like, oh, this brand sucks, I could have done this better. Like, it's just always always been the design community. But then they started touching on more of the political issues of it, and I was like, this is weird for Design X, for designer community here. This is interesting. Then I started seeing it getting covered in more political spaces and this, that, the other, and I was like, oh, this is a cultural issue. What's happening here? And like, I kind of like, that was like my introduction to, my intro to all of it was, I was like, whoa, it started in my community here on X. And then it kind of, and then I saw it on the peripherals, and I was like, wow, this is wild. And to see different business, watching a couple different podcasts and approaching it kind of from the perspective we're approaching it today is like, from a business perspective, how does this make sense? What is happening? What could have been happening? What was the boardroom like? What were those conversations like? And I think that is kind of an interesting perspective to take on this. And that's kind of where my head has now gone the past couple of days. Like, okay, what was it like when they're having these conversations of like, we're going to take this in a new direction. We've been both in those conversations and probably in those boardrooms. I've been on both sides of it. I've been on the side of it where I'm in the in-house and trying to figure out a solution. And I've also been the help being brought in to an in-house position situation where I kind of bring that outside voice and perspective. So I'm kind of curious what happened with them.
Well, and I've been in boardrooms before, not with particular like automotive brands, more in the banking side, but and I do understand that at the board level, one of the things that is heavily emphasized is risk and risk management. And when you're talking about rebranding there's a lot of risk that comes along with that. Is this going, you've got your customer base. Is this going to be accepted by the customer base? Are we trying to go a different customer base? And what's the reputational risk that could be associated with it? Is this going to create opportunity? Is it going to push away potential business and sales? Like what's all the impact and cause and effect? I mean, and it's Jaguar, it wasn't like a small rebrand either. I mean, it was a pretty significant shift from, their original image. And I don't really follow the car company. I'm not really a big car guy. It's my understanding that they've been suffering just for a while anyway, because of sales. So I guess they were just looking for, a new direction, I guess. And it's one of those things where you see companies, I guess they get put into this position where they're having to shift and they're having to change. And, how extreme do you go in that shift, and how extreme do you go to that change? I'm just curious, and I haven't read anything, but have you seen anything that's come through the news as far as anything that's like at the executive level that kind of gives you a peek into the strategy or the thought process that they had?
Yeah, so you get a couple different things. I saw a couple of clips from the director of Jaguar himself, and kind of discussing the approach they're trying to take to it. And the big thing of recognizing, let's call a spade. What their past demographic has been wealthy men who want status. That's simply. Now they are creating EVs for everybody. At least they're trying to be more inclusive, is their perspective on this. So what is kind of what I understand, the reason why they're dying in the first place and why they've actually been bought and sold multiple times over the past 15, 20 years, because their current or their previous demographic they were aiming for is dying off. Like older wealthy men are just they're not buying anymore. They don't exist.
Yeah, right.
And then now we're getting to this EV situation where these brand companies are now trying to compete with the Teslas of the world. And right now, a lot of these companies are not ready to compete with Tesla. Like their technology is still very inferior. And so now they're trying to, okay, how do we do this from a marketing perspective? How do we go about it? And that's where I get really kind of confused, because I understand the inclusiveness aspect of it. And that's where I fear that's where the conversation and the brainstorming stopped at the executive level. They said, we need to be more inclusive. And that's where it ended. They didn't kind of keep going down that rabbit hole and kind of teasing that out of like, okay, so what is the median income of the people we're targeting? Where are they at in life? What are the pains they're feeling? Do they have money for an EV? Do they care about EVs? These are the types of things that are kind of, I don't know if those conversations actually were had. It's like, as long as it's a typical conversation I have with my design clients when we're talking more from UX perspective. We want a product for everybody. Great. That's not reasonable. You need to niche down. This is kind of one of the situations where we want to build something for everybody. Yeah. And you have no one that you're actually targeting. The people that you are targeting right now, quite frankly, this is a judgmental perspective of me, but that's part of business. You need to be making judgments. They don't have money. People, millennials and younger, which is the people they're targeting based on this ad and the shift, don't have money for EVs right now. They don't have money for their rent, for goodness sakes. So it just seems like a bit of a stretch from my perspective.
Well, even the ad, you can look at the ad. It didn't even show anything about a car. It was just, there was people, they did some stuff, walking out of the elevator, they were dressed a certain way, and then that was the end of it. It's like, but they kind of leave a cliffhanger, because I was looking in the comments and social media, and there was people like, do you even sell cars? Like, what is this? And they're like, oh, this is just a teaser. There's more to come. So I guess we're going to see some things rolling out with Jaguar here pretty soon that maybe can help connect some dots. But I do agree with you. And I think that point you made, especially about, you've got Jaguar is known to be a high-end automobile, right? It's like people who drive Jaguars are people with money. Millennials, or people, I guess it would even be millennials, excuse me, it would be people that are, well, you got millennials, but you also have people, was it Gen Z now, kind of that newer generation. You're growing up into this world where like things are just so much more expensive, and I look around in my own neighborhood, where just to be able to like afford to buy a house and like some of the basic needs, it's like, well, yeah, we bought a house 5-10 years ago. So our cost of living is, just from the housing standpoint is almost half of what somebody would have to pay now if they're just entering into the housing market. So, that gets eaten up pretty quickly. And it's like, what money do you have left over unless you just happen to fall into a pretty high paying job, which is not very many people, to be able to afford something like a Jaguar or something at that level of a vehicle. So, I think that's, just hearing what you're saying makes a lot of sense. It's interesting that you said at the board, it's like they just kind of stopped at the inclusion. It's like, okay, now what? Like, I get that this is like part of our branding, being inclusive. That's great. But what about the vehicles? Like, who are we actually connecting with? What is the actual angle that we're going to take, and how are we going to position ourselves in this market? So automotive is a whole beast in itself. I heard Elon talking one time about like running a car company was like the hardest business for him to run, and out of everything, from the rockets and X, and it's like running a car company. There's only 2 car companies that's never failed or had to go, I guess, or had to take government money or go bankrupt, and that was Tesla and Ford. So it's I'm sure it's pretty dicey out there for these automobile manufacturers that are trying to compete in a competitive marketplace. And then there's this shift in like how cars are, ran, now we got EVs and moving from, the fossil fuels into EVs. And what do you do now as far as, manufacturing? So I'm sure there's just a lot of challenges, and we're just seeing with Jaguar this almost like a reaction to everything that's happening just throughout the industry.
Absolutely. And it almost makes you wonder if they are trying to be, again, that more inclusionary perspective. Are they going to start manufacturing cars at a higher rate now? Are you looking to get into the market with Toyota, Kia? Are you bringing Jaguar from a high-end brand down to the everyday Joe brand?
Yep.
You can have that debate of like if that's accomplishing this or not, but that's clearly from their perspective and what they've shared up to this point, that's what they're trying to do. So I will be, as you said, it's a teaser. It's got a lot of people talking. We'll see where that goes. And I'm not a huge believer in this whole any publicity is good publicity.
Neither am I.
This one's bad for them, man. Like when Tats, who's the company that owns Jaguar, his stock just starts taking a hit. That's not good. That's not a good thing. So we'll see what happens. See what they have up their sleeve. I'm not confident that they're it's going to be, I'm not confident it's going to be anything that's going to be worthwhile. But the one comparison I did see, which I thought was interesting, was it seemed like they were trying to emulate the magic of what Apple did with the Macintosh in 1984 with that commercial. It seemed like they were trying to do something similar, and it didn't hit the same way.
Are you talking about the Think Different?
Yeah.
Campaign? Yeah, I could see that. Well, I mean, like I said, they said there was, I guess, some new campaign that's going to be rolling out that's going to reveal more of what they're up to. But it's definitely not good publicity. I think they've. I have yet to see one positive thing that's been said about the whole rebrand. It's all been either jokes or stone throws, all negative. So, for them to turn it around, it's going to take something pretty substantial. And I guess at the end of this, they're either going to look like geniuses or they're going to look, like a failure. And I have a hard time believing it's going to be the former.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I do have like one last thing I want to share on this. And it's actually from the design community, because it was a back and forth that it was interesting to see, because Chris Halaska, who's a very talented designer in the space, he's worked a lot with product teams. His response to this was the reaction of the Jaguar Rebrand is proving how few of you understand how important it is to understand business goals when designing. None of us know when they have what they have planned as a company, yet we're so brutal in our judgment. And I saw that and I was like, fundamentally I agree with that statement, where it's like, we don't know what their business goals are. However, you can see from the outside looking in, they don't seem like they're positive. But then Brett from Design Joy, who is a pretty well-known designer, at least amongst the designers, he was pretty brutal in his response to that. And he responded to Chris with, it's irrelevant what Jaguar has planned when you trash your logo and put dresses on men if you can't tell. So he was like, point blank, that's how he felt about it, right? So it was interesting to see the back and forth in the design community on this as well.
Yeah, I saw some of Brett's commentary. It definitely was. He doesn't have much of a filter.
No, he tells you how it is.
Yeah. So let's shift over to Bluesky. I'm not sure if that's something that you've participated in. I know there's a lot of hype around it. I got on the platform, and just from a user experience standpoint, it seemed like another kind of copy of X or Threads as far as just the experience you get. The only thing that, I was looking into it, the only thing that seemed intriguing is that I guess they're taking this kind of open source, decentralized platform approach to how they're building out their platform, where you own your data, you kind of have your own servers. I don't really know much about how that works. I'm just curious if there's anything that you've seen as from your end, if you've actually even gotten on the platform, or if you've had any involvement in there.
No, I mean, admittedly, I've kind of stayed away from the platform just because I know who the types of people that are hanging out there. And I'm not really a huge fan of what I've been seeing coming out of the behavior on the platform.
Yeah.
However, what you mentioned about the technology behind it, I think is actually very interesting. Taking a more decentralized approach is something that is the future. I 100% agree with that. That's something that Elon's even trying to do with X at some point. The idea that we're not centralizing the authority, centralizing the technology to a single set of hands, I think is a good thing. The fact that Bluesky is doing that is something that is of encouragement to me. And it comes back down to obviously the blockchain and what's happening with Web3, like this whole decentralization completely across the board of all of our major institutions is the new trend. And I think it's a trend that's going to keep going in, because typically, without sounding overly political, freedom typically wins. People crave freedom. They crave to have autonomy over what they are doing. And I think that's something that, you have to take a look at with Bluesky. Once they kind of get through all the political BS of why people are migrating the platform, we'll see if they are able to hold their current user base and then keep those monthly active users going. And then we'll see what happens with the technology behind it. 'Cause I think it would be very interesting.
Well, and I remember, I'm not sure how old you are. I remember when I was, I'm 40. So I kind of went through like the evolution of technology from we were using payphones and call and collect just to be able to, just to try to get picked up from the ball field, to like now everybody has cell phones and you're interconnected. And I remember when like social media was starting to come out and people were getting on the platform. And at the time it was like, well, this is just like a cool way for us all to connect and converse and, stay on top of, because it used to be, what was it, AOL Instant Messenger. Like that's what it was. Everything was just AIM. You'd have a little status message up of where you were at, and you would just have little chat conversations. And then, I remember MySpace was coming out, and then you had Facebook, and then where we are today with all the different social media. And it's really become this kind of extension of who we are in terms of just like where our lives exist. It's like where people are building personal brands. There's this whole personal brand movement where people are, getting on these platforms, or sharing their thoughts and their takes and insights and perspectives and their work. And, they're making connections, building relationships. It's where they're consuming news. And it's become this integrated thing into our lives. And now it's like at a point where there's serious conversations that people are having around data and privacy and all those factors. And I agree with you. I got really deep into like the crypto blockchain space back in 2022. And I remember just like it's kind of one of those things, like once you see it, you can't unsee it, as far as the decentralization of access and how accounting works. It's like somebody had explained to me before, as far as like crypto or blockchain is like accounting 3.0. It's just a tool for accounting, and NFTs are like the new version of titles. And so you look at, all aspects of how we interact. Now we have social media. Well, this is also a place that needs decentralization in order to preserve freedom, to allow protection of data and privacy, and, some of the things that have become bigger issues recently, as there's been, what was that data breach or something that happened with Facebook a couple of years ago? That was a big news story. You have like all the algorithms. I'm just curious to see how it works in practice as these platforms start to introduce it. And that was the thing when I saw Bluesky and I was looking more to, I was like, oh, they're actually trying to position themselves as the decentralized platform. So what does that actually mean? Like, what is, like, when you actually wrap your mind around it? Because when I was signing up, it did ask me if I wanted to set up my own, I think it was like custom server or custom. Okay, great. Well, what does that mean? Does that mean I could just post anything I want and I don't have to worry about my profile getting shut down? Is that what that means? Or does that mean something else?
Yeah, it is very interesting, right? Because I do find it fascinating that they've established the decentralization as a key component as a sales tactic, essentially. But the people that they're attracting don't care about that. They're essentially fleeing a platform that they're upset that there isn't more censorship on it. So what is the thought process here of like, no, like, yeah, well, anyone can post anything, and then yet I heard the complaints coming out that people on Bluesky are also getting upset because they keep getting censored.
Yeah.
So what is it truly decentralized? What's actually happening? It's one of those, I find decentralization, it's either kind of like being pregnant. It's either you are or you're not. There's no little bit of it. And so I just want to see what is there's a lot of people who like throwing the buzzwords out, but what's the actual action behind it? Is it actually open source? Can I actually see the code? How are things being developed? How are things happening behind the scenes? I'd be curious.
Yeah, I noticed that too. I mean, there was people that were posting like screenshots where they had, made a comment that they knew was polarizing and kind of flirted with the fringe of like whether or not you would get censored on other platforms, and that they were immediately blocked on Bluesky. And it contradicts the message of, we're here to remove the centralized component or that agent that's kind of making the choices on how content's being distributed on the platform. It's like, well, if that was true, then this wouldn't be happening. So what's the truth here? Are you actually decentralized? Is that what's going on? But maybe it's something where, and I don't know, I haven't actually tested this function, but I'd be curious, like, if you were to take the route, because I did the Bluesky server, but there was like another option where I guess I could have had my own server. But the reason I didn't take it was because I was just testing it out. But maybe I should go back in there and just see what it's about, just to see like how they're thinking through the technology piece, because that could be interesting for a model for social media where you can control your own data. Does this mean that like, I know a lot of people have email lists because email is a way, it's kind of like an insurance policy. You build this huge giant audience. Well, if you get them on your email list, now you own the traffic. Well, if you have your own server and it's decentralized, is there even a need to, like, does the email insurance policy, is that even relevant now if you have that kind of setup in social media, where now I don't have to worry about being shut down because I actually own the server, owning the server, however you want to define that, but you have control over it. Therefore, it's your audience, it's your people, you control what they see and what they don't see. I don't know. Those are some of the questions I have. Like, is that going to break some of the traditional strategies that we've been seeing around content creation and how distribution works as a creator, being that building the email list, and how that kind of plays into the protections that you put in place when you're building an audience?
Absolutely. And I think that's obviously because we're still in the infancy of a lot of this technology and understanding of it. I think that's kind of how we're all feeling, where I feel like when it's here and it's actually in our hands and it's like, oh, this is how it works. Like, that makes so much more sense now versus like, talking about it, kind of in these vague terms, like we are currently. It's like we have an idea of what it is, like what's it actually solving, how is it actually going to work, this, that, the other, where's the information lie, do I have that type of thing happens. But when it hits, I think it's going to hit hard, and we're going to get a better idea of what's happening and how it all operates. Because I remember when you're going down that memory lane about the evolution of all this technology. And I remember in my media studies class in the 11th grade, I remember my teacher bringing up Twitter. And that's when Twitter was just first getting kicked off. And it was, it was back when you had the 9 dial, and that's how you put your messages in, and it was like 160 characters and all this, right? But he was talking about how the great use case of it was like a huge explosion happened in the Middle East. We first heard about it on Twitter before the news picked it up. And that was the revolution of this whole this technology, where it's like, whoa, that's actually crazy. We got that. And then I remember hopping on it. I made my account in 2008, and I just like I started following celebrities, and I was like, whoa, I can send a message directly to them, and they're gonna see it. Whoa, like this is crazy. Like that was just not a thing. You had no access to your favorite people that you followed. Now all of a sudden, now people are building businesses off these things, and now we're here where we are. And I think the same thing's going to happen with decentralization technology. It's like, it's kind of vague. Don't really understand how it's going to work. But then when it hits, it's going to be like, oh, this is a game changer.
The thing about the blockchain and getting into this topic of blockchain and kind of decentralization, and I remember when I was in 2022, when I was really active, the thing that was a big constraint in kind of operating on a blockchain type platform was just the learning curve. It's like, if anybody's ever, we'll just talk crypto for a second. Like if anybody's ever set up a MetaMask wallet and interacted with like a decentralized finance protocol, it's really freaking complicated. And you have to be your own security agent too. Like you're responsible for making sure you're securing your keys. Like I've got a safe that's got a cold wallet storage. I connect it. I mean, it's just all this stuff, right? It's just like, there's no way at its current stage, this is going to go into mass adoption. There's just too many steps here. It's just too confusing. I mean, me as a tech person who's in tech every day, there were moments where I was feeling a bit lost on how to even interact with it. And you take somebody who's tech illiterate, which is really most people, maybe not in the younger generation, but definitely some of the older millennials and even older people, like they can barely turn on a computer and access the internet. You know, you put something like this in front of their face, they're very lost. So somebody had told me, as a mentor of mine, and I thought this made a lot of sense when he was talking about blockchain. It's like, eventually blockchain is just going to be ubiquitous. It's just going to be like, it's there, it's in the background, it's operating, but you don't really know that you're interacting with it. And it's kind of like, it was like the analogy he used was like AWS. It's like, people don't go and like, hey, I'm going to get on AWS today and do some stuff. It's like, no, you just open your phone and you open up Netflix and you play a movie and it just happens to be running on AWS, but you're not actually interacting with it. And I think that's what's going to happen with blockchain, is that the infrastructure is getting built. There's certainly some security things that they've got to figure out. There's some regulation, I think, that needs to be more clear as far as what that is. And then as that all kind of comes to fruition, people are going to be, working on blockchain and not even realizing that they're actually on the chain, performing any of these functions. Same with social media. But as far as how that looks, it's just, I don't know yet. I'm not sure, but I do believe that the ubiquitous nature of how blockchain is going to be set up is going to have to be true for mass adoption to actually happen.
Yeah, that is one thing you brought up, the idea of the, taking more ownership over your security. That freaks a lot of people out. And it's funny. I was talking back when I first started my podcast back in 2020. This was one of the first conversations me and my co-host had, was where was the jump in the generations? You talk to my grandparents, they won't trust a bank at all. They're like, no, I'll keep the money under my mattress. Then my parents' generation came in and it was like, no, keep all the money in the bank all the time. And I was just like, where did that change? When did that happen? Because now we've seen happen in the world. There's becoming a larger population of younger people who are just like, I don't really trust the banks. I'm going to start pulling out of this a little bit. And so now people have the option if they want to be in the banks or they don't want to be in the banks. And so where did this, the idea of being skeptical of banking institutions skip a generation? How did that happen? Why did that happen? Obviously, I think a big part of it is Wall Street and all the excitement that happened there. But that's kind of what we're going to see here with the mass adoption, is people are still kind of in that, I just want someone else to take care of the security of this. I don't like the trust of it being in a safe in my house that my whole retirement relies upon. Like that freaks people out, and rightfully so. I totally understand why that would freak you out. But there's got to be some better ways. Because I remember when, again, forgive the political nature of it, I just thought it was a very interesting story. Because when, the Freedom Convoy happened up here in Canada, the convoy accepted a lot of payment in Bitcoin.
Mm-hmm.
And news spread that the government confiscated the Bitcoin digitally. And I was like, that's not really how Bitcoin works. You can't just confiscate Bitcoin
Yeah.
digitally if they have it on their own wallets.
Right.
And then news actually came out where the government actually kicked down the guy's door, went and took his wallet out of his safe and confiscated it. Yeah,
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was wild. And I was like, oh, okay, that makes more sense. That actually is how it works. You'd actually have to go and take the physical asset, or take the physical key, I should say. So that's kind of where like that freaks people out. It's all it takes is, that's why insurance is such a big industry in our countries, is because people are paying for, what I'm talking about. Yeah, it's peace of mind, and that's kind of what they're looking for. And that's, right now Web3 doesn't offer that. People don't like that. No. One bad robbery away from losing, millions of dollars in retirement. So yeah.
Well, and I think another thing to say about that is, I think generally speaking, and I hate to overgeneralize because I'm not saying that everybody's like this, but I think a lot of people are, is, and myself included. I mean, I'll put myself in this bucket too. This happens, anytime there's a problem, it's natural for people to want to find somebody else to make it like, it's like, I don't want to take the responsibility of the problem. I want somebody else that I can call that I can hold responsible for the problem. And with crypto and, all this in crypto blockchain, you're the one that's responsible for everything. There is no help desk to call and that you can complain to if something happens with your money. It's 100% your fault. It teaches you, and this is the thing that came to my mind when I was in the crypto space in 2022, which I think was probably one of the biggest value adds I got from being in this space, was it really taught me a lot about taking extreme responsibility, because my eye and understanding and behavior when it comes to interacting with stuff online is more secure now than it's ever been in the history of me being alive because of crypto. I'm so much more conscious of what I click on. I'm so much more conscious of messages that are sent to me, people that's calling my phone with whatever offer they have. And even just like extending into other areas of my life, I just always take that extra second now to like think about the decision I'm going to make, because I was so involved in the blockchain space. And I knew that if I thought too fast or acted too quick or clicked a link I didn't double check, the next thing you know, I'm going to look at a wallet that just got drained. Yeah. And it teaches you that extreme responsibility, but people don't like that. Like, and I would see it in the community chats where if something didn't go somebody's way, like they're looking for somebody to blame. Like, I need somebody, because that's what I'm accustomed to. Like, you order something off Amazon and it comes to your house and it's not what you thought it was. Like, you're like, Amazon, like, take this shit back and give me my money back. And I don't want to hear anything other than yes. And if it's not that, then I'm going to be really upset about it. But you just can't do that in decentralization. So I think there is this dissonance between like what somebody believes they want and what their behavior shows. It's like, I want decentralization. I want freedom. I want all these things. Yet my behavior says that no, I actually want somebody to kind of still be like in charge, because when something goes wrong, I need to go and point to that person and say, fix it for me. So I do think that there is, it's like, where's the balance there as things move to decentralization? Because what you say you want and what your actually behavior shows a lot of times can be two different things.
Yeah. And I think we saw this with probably one of the biggest social experiments we've probably ever experienced in our lives was through the pandemic. And what I learned through that was people will always value their safety over their autonomy, which I thought that was very interesting.
Yes.
And I understand it, because it comes from a place of trying to self-preservation. You want to survive. And so when you bring in the decentralization, Web3 stands in counter to that. Everyone says they want freedom, and then it's like, actually, I'm okay with this, another entity dealing with it. And I just think I really do think if this mentality keeps up, we're just going to get another variation of banks. But in the Web3 world, it's like, yeah, we'll take care of you. We'll hold your keys for you. Come when you want. and we'll deposit and take it out, and we'll make sure that everything's secure. And I could definitely see something like that happening. I don't know if we'll ever, well, I don't know if ever, but not anytime soon are people going to get comfortable with having that type of accountability for funds.
100% agree. I don't see that either. And that's a really good point. There's this, it's like you've got freedom and you got safety, and they're not at all correlated, and they work inverse with each other. It's like the more safety you get, the less freedom you have. It's like, so what is it that you actually want? Freedom sounds great though. It's like on paper, it sounds really great, but there are some trade-offs to it that you have to think about, and a lot of this trade-offs comes with the safety. So,
totally.
Yeah.
It's wild, man. It's wild. It reminds me to think of that woman who defected from North Korea, and why people, her friends, her family were looking at her like she had 3 heads because she wanted to leave North Korea. I said, why would you want to leave? Everything's safe. Everything's fine. And it was terrifying for her to leave, because when she actually got to the States, she didn't know what to do with herself, because now she was accountable for herself, and she had a really hard time ingratiating herself and integrating into American society, because she could make decisions for herself after being told and grown up, and the government said, no, we'll make all the decisions for you. Very fascinating.
Right. I never heard it. What's the story called? I have to look that up.
Oh yeah, I'll actually pull up her name here. Very interesting. Yeonmi Park is her name. Yeah, I'll put this in the chat.
I'm still kind of learning the ropes here with StreamYard. I was going to throw it on a banner. Okay, cool. I'm going to throw this on a banner for anybody. We got 5 people watching right now, which is pretty.
Let's go.
Pretty awesome. Yeah, man. Let's see here.
I'll do you one even better. She does a 3.5 hour podcast with Joe Rogan talking about these things. There it is.
Let's see here. Oh, perfect. Let's here. What I'll do is, building the airplane right now while it's in the air. Let's see here.
That's how we do things, man.
Yeah, that's the so if you just type that in Google, and you'll see the Joe Rogan. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and present the screen share. Yeah, that right there.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So episode 1691. I'll have to check that out. I'd be curious to hear what kind of stuff Joe has to say on that kind of topic. That's wild though. I mean, to be able to lead North Korea, I guess you just don't know any better. You just don't know, what freedom actually means, and what it means to make decisions for yourself. I mean, and to go from not having any ability to actually choose for your own life to like, hey, like whatever you want to do, you can make for yourself. Welcome to the United States. Yeah. It's got to be quite the culture shock. And
it was like probably one of the more valuable interviews I've seen Joe do, because it was just so hearing her perspective of like leaving and why she left, but like also not leaving with no promises of actually having a better life. Like I think I heard the USA is something that's really cool, but like I don't know that. All I know is I can't be here anymore. I'm like literally starving. So yeah.
Well, and imagine somebody going from like the United States to North Korea, like inversing, like what kind of to not being able to make any decisions for yourself, and everything, you're told to do everything you're told to do, by the government. I can imagine.
Well, and then we'll inject Web3 and see how you do.
Yeah. Then everything just like completely blows up. I don't even know where the Web3 piece it would even fall into place in a country like North Korea.
It wouldn't. That's the thing. It would stick with the government is what would happen.
So that's another thought too. It's like Web3, and I mean even the internet in general. It's like everything's globally connected, and you got countries that would not accept decentralization as part of the fabric of their country. So it's like, how do the people in that country interact with people that are in decentralized based countries? And, is that even something that would even work? Is there a different path that people would have to take to be able to transact with them? I don't know. Those are all questions.
That's actually essentially what will happen, and we kind of are seeing a variation of that. Like the one country that always blows me away, how they pulled this off. I mean, I think they've done horrible atrocities to humanity, but the way they've allowed to structure their government is very fascinating to me. I don't know how China figured out how to do capitalism while keeping their country communist. Like there's like governments like, well, we love capitalism, but our people will do communism, and
Right.
and that's kind of how they have operated. And what I find interesting is because obviously they do the CBDCs in China, and I think that's essentially what's going to end up happening is people will have to, if they're transacting in Bitcoin or any other type of currency, they will essentially have to do the translate from Bitcoin into their CBDC. And I think that's typically how it'll go so that the government can oversee the transaction and allow it to go through or not.
Yeah. Yeah. That would make sense. Just kind of an exchange, just kind of like what we're doing now with exchanging currencies.
Yeah.
Right?
Same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Cool. Well, I appreciate this conversation. I'm glad you jumped on with me. Just to talk about some of these current events and, some ways to think about them. Appreciate the insight, especially when it comes to some of the forward thinking pieces, right? When you're talking about blockchain, decentralization, and social media, and kind of what that could look like. I wonder if and maybe there's no answer to this, like if there's anything somebody could do now to, like, it's like playing chess. It's like I'm trying to position myself on the board with anticipation of what's to come into the future. And, it takes a little bit of clairvoyance there to be able to kind of look at how things are operating today, to be able to say, okay, based on certain aspects of how things are starting to move and where the puck is going, right? This would be a way to position yourself. But yeah, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts with that? Is there anything that you're doing these days to kind of position yourself for the future?
Yeah. So I admittedly, where I think things are going, regardless of what direction our economies take, whether they go down the CBDC route or they decide to go full Bitcoin, whatever may happen, I believe that no matter what, I think digital currency is the future. No matter which way we paint it, it's just going to happen.
Yep.
But I think almost every economy, when they move this digital currency, will be built off Bitcoin. Similar to how every economy is built off of the gold, or at least was built off the gold standard. It's going to the same thing that happen with Bitcoin. So my thought process is just collect as much as I possibly can at this point in time, whether it's at 100 grand or down to 60 or down to 40, just keep buying and collecting, because there'll be a time where, it'll be a lot. We see the same thing that's happened with gold. We see how much, gold costs now. It's like, well, how much did it cost 30 years ago is drastically different. Yeah. The same thing's going to happen with Bitcoin too. So that's just kind of where I'm kind of maneuvering myself when it comes to at least my investment decisions. And then as well, when it comes to design decisions, like, I'm a designer, work in the UX space. And I love being on the cutting edge technology. I've always loved working with startups. Loved working with entrepreneurs who just got crazy dreams. They want to do crazy things. And the Web3 space is just fraught with it. And that's where I'm maneuvering my business into, is more Web3 based design work, because it's just, there's so many cool problems to solve from a UX perspective. Yeah. That, like, as you said, we talked about it, there's so much complication to just onboarding somebody into Web3 just to be able to even hold tokens or hold their currencies on. Like, there's just so much to work through there. And I think those are fascinating problems to try and solve.
I did not realize that all right, I don't know if you understand this concept. Have you read the book? Or understand the concept? It's called Diffusion of Innovation. Are you familiar with that?
Actually, no. Walk me through it.
Okay. So this is really helpful for anybody. It's really helped me, especially when I was in the blockchain space. Still am, but just not as heavy as I used to be. But there's this concept called diffusion of innovation. And where this can be useful is in a couple ways. Number one is kind of understanding, it's all about like how ideas and technology spreads and becomes massively adopted. And it goes through this process, which is the diffusion of innovation. It was a book that was written back in the 60s. I think the name of it, or the name of the author, is Everett. I want to say Everett Rogers. Let me get the diffusion of innovation. you know what? I'm going to actually pull up the graph here because the visual really makes it easier to explain this. So because I've got StreamYard and I can be fancy. Let me pull this up because this is, let's see here, diffusion of innovation. Okay. I wonder if I can enlarge this.
Oh, yes. I've seen this chart before.
Yeah. So you've got like the innovators, you've got the early adopters. Actually, there's one that should show the chasm. Yeah, this is a better one. So right now, like if you really think about like blockchain's still kind of in this early adoption phase here. And everything. So it's like, Josh, like the way you're describing, like what I'm hearing is like, you're very much so like everybody kind of sits on this diffusion curve somewhere. And the way you talk, like I see you as probably an early adopter, maybe even closer to the innovator. Like these are the weird people. Like when like this is like back in the mid 90s when people were calling like the internet a scam and it was like a fad. It was like, that's because it was down here. Anytime technology's on this kind of on the left side of this tipping point in early adopters, all the people from like the early majority and late majority will criticize it. Because they don't understand it and it's just not part of like our everyday life. So like that's naturally what people do is they criticize things that they don't understand. So as that technology kind of moves across this curve, I wish you could see my mouse, but anyway, I'm kind of drawing the curve here. It becomes more widely accepted. And, you know, so understanding kind of where you are in this diffusion curve, I think is really important because not everybody is a weirdo like these early adopters. You know, these are like the weirdos that will try new things. And it's like, what? You're going to get in a self-driving car? What's wrong with you? You know, that's, you can like, if you ever want to know where somebody sits on the diffusion curve, bring up self-driving cars and listen how they respond. If they say, that sounds absolutely nuts, I can't believe anybody would ever get into a self-driving car, that's crazy. You know that they're a late majority person, probably early to late majority. If you hear somebody respond with, yeah, it's pretty interesting, and they're really curious about it, like they're probably an early adopter. Like there's like that's more how their brain is wired. And it's not that there's anything wrong with either way. Laggards are people that just never adopted technology. These are like this is like the guy who like never got a Facebook account, or the old man that still uses a landline. That's your laggards. So what happens is like, and you had brought this up earlier about like the banking, it's like what caused that shift? And usually there's a tipping point. This is like the chasm where something has to happen for it to start to become accepted by the masses. And I believe I've been told, which makes sense with like blockchain and crypto, it's regulation, because like regulation is like kind of what sets the guardrails, right? And says like, okay, this is now safe to like adopt. And typically like the early majority people, my understanding is that once the safety nets are up and it's very clear, you know, what the rules are, they'll start to adopt the technology, assuming that it's like, you know, something that's, if it's anything that's disruptive like blockchain or the internet, it's going to get adopted because it's disruptive. And it's like, I mean, think about not having the internet in this day of time. It would be, you wouldn't even be able to operate for a lot of people wouldn't even be able to operate. And so once the early majority starts to adopt it, the late majority people, they will adopt it when they see that everybody else is doing it. So it's kind of like, oh, like everybody else is getting into self-driving cars, I guess that's okay. Like if everybody else is doing it, then it's okay for me to do it. And then at that point, that's when you start seeing technology really spread. So I think like with blockchain, I think the regulation's a big part of it. I also think how ubiquitous it is and how people interface with it is another part of it too. I just think it's too complicated right now. It's just my opinion. I think it's too complicated in how it's set up, you know, between having to have a cold storage wallet and you've got all these, you know, like just bridging from one chain to another is like you need to take like a semester and some college level course just to figure out how to do that. It's just too complicated. So That's just my thoughts, but that's a good thing to understand, especially when you're thinking about technology and kind of like where to position yourself. It's like, well, where do I sit on that diffusion curve? Because, I might not be, crypto's super volatile. I remember when, I don't know if you ever saw, there's a video where like Bitcoin was at, I think it was like over $100, and then it dropped to a penny, like in a day. and like the video recording is like, oh, this is done. This is never coming back. Like Bitcoin's done. And now it's at $99,000.
Yeah. Crazy.
That's insane. Like, so that's what happens in that innovator early adoption phase. It's just so much rockiness and volatility. And because it's still, all the kinks are getting worked out of it. And eventually that all normalizes, guardrails are put up, and then the masses start to adopt it. So
fair play. That makes a lot of sense. And I actually appreciate bringing that up. That was, I kind of, again, as I saw the chart before, I didn't realize I didn't understand the name to it before. That's cool. And that's the thing. I am that crazy that will kind of jump on random technology. Once I buy into it, it takes a bit of a buy-in from my perspective. I do cautiously jump into things, because I'm like, I'm not that type of crazy. But it is very interesting when you get into the technology, understanding the benefits of it. I was like, yeah, dog, this is crypto. Like I love the volatility of crypto. And you're talking about even the early adopters or even the innovators. Yeah, not everyone wants to jump and be scolded and completely interrogated by a banking institution for an hour just to move their funds. That's happened to me on multiple occasions, just trying to buy more Bitcoin. They're just like, well, you know what you're doing? And it's like, yes, get out of my face. Yeah, I'm done. So it's just, not everyone has a stomach for that too, which I get.
Yeah. It definitely, it takes a certain type of person, I think, to be willing to kind of play in those early adoption innovator stages with any technology. I was in Phoenix a couple weeks ago for an event, and I saw, was it Waymo, like the self-driving taxis that were kind of going around picking people up. I almost booked one, but it just didn't happen because there was like an app and I had to figure all this stuff out. And I was like, I don't got time for that, but I would have got one, but yeah, it's just like, you just see it. It's just driving around the roads. Like it's anything else. And again, just a normal person. Just the only difference is there's just not somebody in the front seat driving the car. Yeah. So
fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Wild. Well, thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah. I appreciate you jumping on. This is good times. And I don't know how I'm going to keep doing these live streams. I enjoy them. There's been 8 people watching. So on X. So thanks for watching. And as long as people are watching and there's people willing to jump on and have cool conversations about stuff, I'm going to keep doing them. So that being said, I will sign off and we'll see you on the next one.
Absolutely. Thank you.